Real stories of werewolves, of dogman from history, from your emails, illustrated and animated with the democratizing magic of machine learning AI. Welcome to Scary Stories.
Alpha Werewolf Legends. Dear Scary Stories NYC, I've been watching your show recently because you promised to do stories about alpha werewolves or dogman this month. Instead, I'm seeing alpha females and I see dogman puppies. Is Kathleen Kennedy running your channel? Are you trying to run up your ESG score? Or whatever it's called these days, I can't keep up on that stuff. But Scary Stories NYC, I'm not going to be a hater. I'm going to be your friend. I'm going to help you out. Because you see, I have known many werewolves in my day. And I'm going to educate you about the secret, true history of some real werewolf legends. I have hunted with my pack since time immemorial. Well, for 17 years anyway. We are a Pennsylvanian werewolf pack who hunt as dogmen do. At least as far as we know how dogmen hunt. We're a pack of werewolves who strive to behave like the mythical dogman lives. I had thought this was based on specific information, but apparently it's based on legends. We don't really know if the dogman still exists, but we believe strongly that he at least once did. And that when he did, that was the perfect life to live. That was the life to emulate. Roam, hunt, kill, eat, make love, sleep, then go back to roaming. Question: what is the downside of this lifestyle? Answer: there is no downside to this lifestyle. This is how nature intended us to live. Some of the women in our pack argue that humans were meant to live as hunter-gatherers, that we are not wolves. They make vegetable side dishes for our carnivore feasts sometimes, which I think is quite charming. In spite of thinking it's cute, I'm not going to start eating my veggies. That would defeat the entire point of becoming a werewolf in the first place, at least as far as I'm concerned. When we bring down some prey in the wild, the men go into such a feeding frenzy that none of the ladies are going to be able to get our attention even for mating, let alone eating rabbit food. So their attempts to introduce a hippie diet to us werewolves has not taken hold thus far. One of the main reasons people join the pack, or young men at least, is that there's no taboo against fighting, as long as you only start fights within your own status or lower. So kids with a lot of extra energy to blow off sometimes find it healthier to just get out there and scrap with other guys their age, especially when the alternative is being drugged into a drooling oblivion. I'm going to use code names to tell you about the greatest figures in our pack's history. I won't be outing any of their human identities, so if you're waiting for that, don't bother. If you know which pack I'm talking about and you're familiar with us, then you should be able to tell who I'm talking about each time. If not, then just sit back and learn some new stories about us and our past. Our first leader was Magnus, or at least that's what I'm going to call him in this. He was the one who found out how to become a werewolf. It had become a lost art or practice. In the early days of forming this pack, there was some experimentation, because part of the ritual had been lost to history, and so Magnus warned the early practitioners going in that they might become a werewolf, or they might experience no change at all, or they might transform into a hideous mess of deformed animal, unable to survive long enough to transform back into their human self. The transformation worked for Magnus, but not initially for everyone else. And the reason it's a safer transition now than it was back then is largely because of Magnus himself. Besides being an amateur mythologist, he was a professional chemist in his human form. So when altering the ritual did not work, he added a potion of his own invention to the ceremony. And this served to keep the initial transformation pure and on track. So our pack is based largely on old writings, but augmented with Magnus's own powerful liquid concoction. Now, I've had it, obviously, but I can't tell you what was in it. I mean, I literally can't tell you, because I'm not high up enough in the pack to be allowed to know. You need to fully transform into a wolf the first time, in order to continue on from there in either wolfen or upright werewolf form. I mean, it starts to become more of a personal thing each time you transform, but it starts with a full transformation, or it doesn't start at all, at least in our pack. If you can't go fully into the wolf, you aren't ready for any of the rest of it afterward. I'm sure there are other packs where things happen differently. I've heard stories. Magnus was the first and the greatest of us. Without him, none of us would have become what we are. He passed on before I was born, so you get a sense that the pack already has survived for fairly long. I'm in my later 30s as I write this, and I've been a pack member for 17 years, or it will be 17 in October. Magnus left us at the end of the 20th century, which he called the human century. This was the century when America led the world and freedom and liberty were taken for granted. Magnus didn't see that lasting too much longer and resolved that it might be better not to continue being a human in a future where humans would have increasingly less and less freedom. And so he decided he just wouldn't be a human any longer, at least not all the time. And with this decision, Magnus showed us all a way out of the insanity of what had once been the wisest species on the planet. Homo sapiens has had its run. Now it's time for Homo Magnus. Magnus foresaw the idiocracy years before Mike Judge. He predicted de-evolution before even Gerald Casale. He could tell that humanity was on the cusp of a new Dark Ages, and he was more in the mood for a new Renaissance. So Magnus created the idea of a Renaissance first, and he believed in that idea more than anything else. He went to bed at night feeling the answers to those questions, knowing they were coming to him soon, knowing it was inevitable. And then strange chance occurrences kept happening to Magnus. Some might call them random coincidences, but to Magnus they were very meaningful synchronicities. And they told him he was on the correct path. He kept meeting people who knew things that added to his knowledge base, and he kept finding clues he hadn't expected to find. Magnus felt certain that he was being guided in his journey, and he knew it was going to come into formal being, as long as he kept dreaming it into being. And then one day, a book was left on Magnus's doorstep. He never found out who left it there, but whoever did opened many doors to our founder. It was a very old book, but not prehistoric or anything. It had been written in Latin in the first Dark Ages, and so Magnus took to translating it and teaching himself Latin both at the same time. This was a book of spells and enchantments, and when he had slogged through most of it, doing cursory translations of some parts and more detailed translations of parts he found more interesting, Magnus came to the section about transforming oneself into a divine being, both animal and human. In this philosophy, what makes the creature divine is its animal nature, as counterintuitive as that might seem to the modern mind. A man who tears someone's throat out goes to jail or worse. A wolf that does that nourishes itself and moves on in life. The same act can be seen as evil and depraved, or as divine, depending on who is doing it. It's not evil for a wolf to kill. Nature has wolves so that the weaker parts of the herds get picked off. It might not sound sweet, but that's the way nature chooses to handle the situation of population control. Granted, just because you're a wolf, it doesn't mean you can get away with anything you want to do. If a human captures a wolf that's killed a man, and if that human can get it alone, they will kill it in revenge. Sure, they'll make up excuses why they are noble and it isn't really revenge. It's not revenge, they say, it's just they want to prevent that wolf from taking any other humans down. But that's not divine. Cattle who can corner a killer wolf alone will stop him, in just the same way as a human might shoot him. Cows don't write fancy words about why they stomp you out, though. They just crush your brains and then they go back to chewing on grass. They have no need to virtue signal, and they have no need to feel less guilty. Why is that? Because cows are divine. They are pure animals closer to creation, just as infants are closer to God than us adults. There is no original sin if you're a cow, or if you're a wolf. You don't need to be saved. You're already divine. And becoming a werewolf erases your human sin. It makes you natural. It makes you divine. Magnus is the one who guided all of us to this realization. But then he passed the mantle on while he was still fairly young. Magnus was considered the wise man of our tribe once he stepped down, and he lived to be a ripe old age. Would he have lived so long if he had remained a political figure within the group? We'll never know. In his new role, though, Magnus was able to be the moral conscience of the group, without having to become personally involved in internal squabbles. And we ended up going in the direction he indicated, as the 20th century was a time of great respect for wisdom, to an extent not seen any longer, at least not in your human world. Now, Magnus did not have a chosen successor exactly. What he did was he chose 6 worthy possible successors, and he had those 6 debate publicly in front of the rest of the pack. Magnus asked the first few questions, but soon the pack was calling out questions, wanting to know the candidate's stance on different issues concerning the present and future of the pack. An issue in those days was whether or not to allow females a partial vote or not. These days they get a full vote, but the issue may continue to be in flux for another generation before feeling settled. So at any rate, Magnus demonstrated his leadership abilities, even as he abdicated the leadership role. He chose 6 fine werewolves, any of whom might have made a good successor, and then he let the pack themselves work it out, who their next leader would be. Let's call our second leader Cheney, not after the former vice president of the US, but I'm referring to the actor who played the Wolfman in the movies. Our Cheney was a good but somewhat inflexible leader. Heading up a pack of canines is not as hard as herding cats, but if you use a strict disciplinary approach, then the canines will fall in line 9 times out of 10. And if you're living and hunting in a forest plentiful enough with food, then keeping a sense of strict adherence to disciplinary protocol is usually all the leading you're going to have to do. Keep the pecking order in order, and the rest of it runs itself, basically. This explains our werewolf philosophy. Absolute freedom within your pecking order of the group. When Cheney ran with another 5 who had been chosen by Magnus, he had stated how long he thought he could be an effective leader. It was a question asked of all the candidates. Cheney had said 30 years, and after he had served those 3 decades, there was pressure on him to choose 6 possible successors, as Magnus had done. This had never been formally written down as the way to pass the torch, but enough of the pack liked it this way that there was an expectation of it to continue. The winner that time was Frederico. He ran on the philosophy of absolute freedom within one's pecking order, and absolute freedom over all of the rest of nature. This had always been our philosophy, but it solidified under Frederico. He is my pack leader. He is the first I had a chance to vote for myself, and he won. Nobody ever felt they had voted wrong either, as Frederico led us through an era of great change, but also greater financial prosperity than ever before. We now maintain business in the human community to help finance our werewolf lifestyle, with almost 40% of our staff now being humans who don't even know we are werewolves. Frederico had the genius vision to get back into human business just enough to afford us greater freedom in our lifestyle, and nobody can deny that his ideas have improved our everyday lives. Besides his business genius, Frederico has displayed a great sense of mercy toward humans that has heavily influenced my generation of werewolves. Frederico has pointed out that this is the first generation where wild werewolves have a greater life expectancy than domesticated humans. It's a rather unprecedented development for any wild species to live longer than any domesticated one, but my pack has succeeded in doing just that, under the leadership of our alpha male, Frederico. Absolute freedom within your status level. That is our solution for finding order out of the chaos. You have freedom up until the roof of your pecking order in the group. No glass ceilings, all hard concrete ones. The order doesn't change until someone dies or a new person is voted in. Then challenges can be made to the order it gets involved. When I was in my second year, I witnessed a challenge in which a pack member was accused of not performing all his duties. The pack voted that the challenge had merit, and then after that, things got very violent. This happens rarely, and has not occurred again so far since. But the rule is still on the books. It could happen again as soon as next year. This is unlikely, but not impossible. I think that erasing the blood rituals like these status challenges would be a great loss to the pack, and I think I've observed that the threat of a bloody challenge keeps everyone performing the tasks required of someone on their level. They don't want to lose that status. They don't want that to be challenged. Now, some might say that fearing the loss of status is the opposite of freedom, and I fart in the general direction of those people. You can live alone in the woods, or you can work as part of a pack and do things more efficiently. Nobody is forcing you to do either. Yes, you make trade-offs in life. Even children understand that much. If you value freedom as much as I do, then you choose the life with the most freedom. If I'm in this pack, it must be a lifestyle with more freedom than any other I've come across. It's just that simple. If our pack had a Mount Rushmore of alpha werewolf legends, the first and largest would be Magnus. Then he would be flanked on either side by Cheney and Frederico. Even if it stood 1,000 feet high, it could never communicate the majesty of the men that the portraits would be based upon. These were brave men, honorable men, who taught you to be wild and never feared that they were leading a pack of wild men. These were leaders who challenged you to be more free. They did not fear us for our strengths. They encouraged us to be stronger. And now that Frederico has chosen me as one of the 6, I have a responsibility to decide what my term as pack leader would focus on, and how long I think I could realistically lead. As I am in my 30s, I am the oldest of the candidates, but I think I could do 30 years anyhow. It remains to be seen if others would agree with me about that. I might be better off acknowledging my age and offering a shorter term. Some people might like the idea of that. But it's not really about the best strategy for my campaign. It's what would be the best for the pack, for our continuing on into the future, and becoming a safer haven for free men. Even as the human parts of the world seem to apparently be sinking into something quite different, there are still men who recognize their innate right to freedom in their life choices, and a growing number of them are recognizing that becoming a werewolf might actually be less traumatizing than remaining human in the oncoming post-human era of the mid-21st century. Humans are generally motivated to avoid pain and seek pleasure, same as most other living things. And so when the pain of remaining human becomes greater than the pain of transforming into one of us, then you too will want to make the change. So, Scary Stories NYC. If nothing else, now your Alpha Dogman month will have at least one episode that's truly about real Alpha Dogman I have known and loved. Or Alpha Wolfman, as I've never actually met or seen a Dogman so far. If our pack ever does run into a Dogman pack though, now that would be a story. I think I would hire a Hollywood agent to get me a development deal on that or something. You know, I don't really care who pays me, I'm just a wolf that enjoys getting paid. Because I am king of all below my status level in the tribe. And all humans are below the status level of my tribe. No offense, right? Right. Remember, Scary Stories, I'm your friend. I'm the guy who educated you about Alpha Werewolf Legends. S.A. Rose, the Rose that knows. Please join us in thanking today's executive producer, S.A. Rose, for making this episode possible. How fitting for an episode about Dogman legends to have S.A. Rose as executive producer, as this individual is certainly a Dogman legend around here. We couldn't do it without you, S.A., as you are truly one of our greatest executive producers. Here to explain more about that is our international TV spokesmongrel, Henry Lee Dogman. Hank. Thanks, Biggie. And thanks to all of you for watching this far. If you liked it, please click like. If you'd like to see more of our work, please subscribe. And also click that bell icon if you'd like to be notified when we put out a new episode. To become an executive producer, you can donate to us through the thanks button under each of our videos or through our paypal.me/PeterBernard209 page. To receive cool perks like secret uncensored Dogman episodes far too wild to ever run on this channel, you can become a YouTube channel member by clicking the join button. Or join our PayPal subscribers club at peterbernard.com. Joining either at the $3 a month level or above gets you access to our over 25 hours of secret uncensored Dogman stories available nowhere else. Do you have a scary story about Dogman or some other kind of high strangeness that happened to you? Let us know by emailing us at scarystoriesnyc@gmail.com or by leaving us a voicemail message at 804-LA-SCARY. You may need to call back on that one. It cuts off after, I think, 3 minutes. And if you don't want to do any of that stuff, thank you for simply watching to the end. Good night, and have a scary tomorrow.
Come back for more scary stories.